Can I share this table?
Of course, please join us.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
First thing Mark noticed that morning was how loud the diner felt, even though it was barely half full. Silverware clinked against plates, a coffee machine hissed like it was irritated with the day, and somewhere behind the counter a radio murmured an old country song about roads and regret. Mark sat alone in a corner booth, staring at a cracked vinyl seat across from him that used to belong to his wife. It had been 3 years since she passed, yet habit still made him glance up whenever the door opened, as if she might walk in late and smiling, apologizing for traffic. He wrapped his hands around a mug of coffee he had already forgotten to drink, wondering how a place so ordinary could feel so heavy. Saturday mornings at the diner were supposed to be simple. Pancakes, black coffee, a brief escape before the week started all over again. For Mark, they had become a ritual of survival. His daughter was spending the weekend with her grandparents, and the silence at home felt unbearable. Here, among strangers, he could pretend the emptiness was just background noise. He looked down at his phone, scrolling through pictures of his daughter missing her 2 front teeth, the last one his wife had taken before everything changed. He exhaled slowly, steadying himself, telling his heart to behave for just one morning. That was when he heard a soft voice, close enough to feel real. "Excuse me, sir." Mark looked up, surprised, as he rarely spoke to anyone anymore. Standing beside his table was a young girl, maybe 10 or 11, with warm brown eyes and a shy smile that looked practiced, as if she'd learned how to be brave in small doses. She wore a denim jacket slightly too big for her thin shoulders and held a tray with both hands. Only then did Mark notice her left leg was a prosthetic, sleek and metallic, peeking out beneath her jeans. She shifted her weight carefully, waiting. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, her voice polite but uncertain. "Can I share this table?" Mark glanced around. There were other open spots, though many were cramped or near the kitchen. He felt a reflexive urge to say no, not out of unkindness, but because grief had made him protective of his small, fragile bubble. Then he saw the hope flicker in her eyes, the kind of hope that asked for permission to exist. He nodded, clearing the seat across from him. "Of course," he said. "Go ahead." The girl smiled in relief and carefully slid into the booth, placing her tray down with exaggerated care. Up close, Mark noticed the faint freckles across her nose and the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture so familiar it made his chest tighten. She thanked him again and began eating, clearly aware of the shared silence. Mark returned to his coffee, but something had shifted. The booth felt less empty now, less haunted. After a few moments, the girl spoke again. "My name's Lily," she said. "My mom's working the early shift today." She nodded toward the counter, where a tired-looking woman moved quickly between tables. Mark introduced himself, surprised by how long it had been since he'd said his own name out loud to someone new. They exchanged small talk, the kind that feels safe because it doesn't demand too much. Lily talked about school, about how she loved art class and hated math, about how the diner pancakes were the best in town. Mark listened, really listened, and realized how much he'd missed the simple act of paying attention to another human being. As Lily ate, she noticed Mark's phone on the table, the screen lighting up with a picture of his daughter. "Is that your kid?" she asked gently. Mark nodded, smiling despite himself. He told her about Emily. About how she loved soccer and drawing unicorns, about how she was stronger than he ever gave her credit for. He didn't mention his wife at first, but Lily seemed to sense the missing piece. Children, he realized, often see what adults try to hide. "My dad left when I was little," Lily said quietly, her fork pausing midair. "It was just me and my mom for a long time." Mark didn't know what to say, so he simply nodded. Lily glanced down at her leg, then back up at him. "I lost it in an accident," she added, not for sympathy, but for honesty. "People stare sometimes. I used to hate going places alone." She smiled again, smaller this time. "But my mom says if you wait for the world to be comfortable, you'll never leave the house." Something about her words settled deep in Mark's chest. He had been waiting too, waiting for the ache to fade before he allowed himself back into the world. He realized how much time he'd spent hiding in plain sight, surrounded by people yet feeling invisible. Lily's courage, worn so casually, felt like a mirror held up to his own fear. Their conversation was interrupted when a man at a nearby table muttered something under his breath, loud enough to be heard. "Kids these days," he said, eyes flicking toward Lily's leg. "Always looking for attention." Mark felt a surge of anger rise before he could stop it. Lily's shoulders stiffened, but she didn't look up. In that moment, Mark understood something clearly for the first time in years. Silence could be just as cruel as words. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. The diner went quiet. "She's not looking for attention," Mark said firmly, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "She's looking for a place to sit. Same as anyone else." The man scoffed but said nothing more. Mark sat back down, heart pounding, and realized Lily was staring at him, eyes wide. "Thank you," she whispered. Mark shrugged, embarrassed, but inside something cracked open, letting light in. When Lily finished her meal, she gathered her tray and stood carefully. "I'm glad I asked to sit here," she said. "Sometimes one question can change everything." Mark smiled, surprised by the truth in her words. He watched her walk back to the counter, her steps uneven but determined, and felt a warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. Before leaving, he paid not only his bill but hers as well, slipping a note to her mother that read, "You're raising a brave girl. Thank you for sharing her with me today." As Mark stepped outside, the morning air felt different, lighter. He sat in his car for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, letting the feeling settle. He realized that healing didn't arrive all at once, like a miracle cure. It came in moments, in questions asked and answered, in tables shared. Lily hadn't erased his pain, but she had reminded him that kindness could still reach him, that humanity was not something he'd lost forever. Later that evening, Mark picked up Emily from her grandparents' house. On the drive home, he told her about the diner, about Lily, about the question that had caught him off guard and changed his day. Emily listened carefully, her eyes bright. "Daddy," she said, "maybe next Saturday we can invite someone to sit with us too." Mark smiled, his throat tightening, and nodded. That night, as he tucked Emily into bed, Mark felt something close to peace. He understood now that life would never be what it was, but it could still be meaningful. Sometimes, all it took was the courage to ask, or the grace to say yes. And somewhere in a small diner, a one-legged girl had reminded a broken-hearted father that the world, despite its scars, was still full of tables worth sharing.